up the running order in front of me. Uh,
Slick professional operation.
yeah, because after 35 shows, I still can't remember how it's done.
Keeps it fresh.
Keeps it fresh. Welcome to I've Never Read Discworld, a pod vodcast on YouTube, Spotify, loads of other places. I'm Andy Luke. I'm on book 29 of my first read through the Discworld series.
And this is PJ Hart. I am on my second to ninth read of most of these books. There are a couple of gaps in my reading of Discworld, I think almost all of which have now been filled, but I'm here to guide Andree along on his journey a little bit, have some fun, some chats along the way. And tonight is a big night for me. Andy's enthusiasm is just bubbling to the surface here too. This is arguably my favorite Discworld book.
You know what? It shot up right to my two mental lists of favorites and bests.
Important distinction. So do you want to tell the listeners what book we're talking about? If they somehow managed, they didn't escape reading the description of the podcast when they clicked on.
You know we're talking about Night Watch. PJ's got a lovely hardback copy there for our video.
Yeah, I think this is the release edition, the hardback from Doubleday, hot off the press. I'm pretty sure I bought this, if not on release day, certainly on release week. I was very, very excited about this book coming out at the time. I do still have the dust jacket somewhere. I just don't know where. Just like to keep my bookshelves all nice and kind of uniform, you know, like a totally normal seeing non-serial killer would do.
That would have been 7th of November 2002.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
I've got a lovely, I can't remember where I picked this up, but it's like new, and it's somehow it has barely a scratch on it from me flying through this. It won an award the following year, the Prometheus Award. I think the previously Pratchett had won the Prometheus Award for The Truth and for three other books, maybe old Discworld books. I know Snuff was among them. And this was exactly 1 month before Wincanton in Somerset decided it would be twinned with Ankh-Morpork. So
yeah. Surprising it took that long for somewhere, especially in Terry's neck of the woods, to decide to make that step, you know, drum up a bit of publicity. But then it's like, you know, Ankh-Morpork, is it the kind of place you want to be associated with in terms of its, you know, its river and its people and its neighborhoods? Not always necessarily the poster for like tourists, or what they have there, the tourist Ankh-Morpork tourist board does have a slogan about fleecing tourists, or is that about fleecing invading armies? I can't remember. Yes, I mean, any kind of activity that brings more attention to Discworld is always welcome. Yeah, just looking actually at the list of Prometheus Award winners here. Yeah, Terry won it for Raising Steam. He won it for Stuff. And he won it for Night Watch, which we're talking about right now. So there you go. I don't know much about this award. It makes me slightly concerned that it's described on Wikipedia as a libertarian science fiction award, which makes me slightly suspicious of it, but maybe the less said about that, the better.
I think it's associated with one of the literary masters of the genre.
Best science fiction or fantasy fiction promoting individual freedom and human rights, or critiquing tyranny, slavery, war, and other abuses of government power. Okay, I mean, it's hard not to get behind that, I guess.
Yeah, and that sounds like Night Watch fits it perfectly.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can totally see how this is the book that's going to get Terry Pratchett on their radar if he wasn't already. Although you said you think he won it for The Truth as well.
Yeah,
I will take you. Yeah. Have we read that yet? What order are we in? Have we done The Truth yet? Yeah. I see. I think I this was around the time, I think I talked about this before, and I was getting back into Discworld, and I think I read Night Watch, The Truth, and Thief of Time all pretty much back to back, but I can't remember in what order. It was the fact that there was a new Guards book, a new Vimes book coming out, that's what kind of got it back on my radar. So I have a feeling I might have read Night Watch first out of those three.
Oh, that's going to have an interesting perspective based on the link between this book and Thief of Time. A few more technical things before we get into our passionate first impressions.
Let's do it.
You don't have a back cover, so I'm going to read the blurb from mine.
Yeah, I mean, when you're not for video viewers, you're not going to get much out of that.
Don't put your trust in revolutions. They always come around again. That's why they're called revolutions. People die and nothing changes. For a policeman, there can be few things worse than a serial killer loose in your city, except perhaps a serial killer who targets coppers and a city on the brink of bloody revolution. For Commander Sam Vimes, it all feels horribly familiar. He's back in his own rough, tough past, without even the clothes he was standing up in when the lightning struck. Living in the past is hard, but he must survive because he has a job to do. He must track down the murderer and change the outcome of the rebellion. The problem is, if he wins, he's got no wife, no child, no future. A Discworld tale of one city with a full chorus of street urchins, ladies of negotiable affection, rebels, secret policemen, and other children of the revolution. Truth, justice, freedom, and a hard-boiled egg.
Good times. Yeah, I mean, what a proposition. I was looking to see if there was a blurb in the inside cover of mine. There's not, but there's quite a nice map. I don't know. Has your edition got this lovely map?
My edition has a much smaller map.
Oh, it's nice. The glorious People's Republic of Treacle Mine Road. Good times. Yeah. So I think, like, you know, if you're me, you know, if you're erstwhile Discworld fan, you know, somebody who came up reading Discworld when they're like 11, 12 years old, you know, it's funny fantasy, and it's, you know, it's playing with tropes and stuff, and it's slowly growing up. And then this book comes out when you're 16. So this book came out when I was 16 years old, and all of a sudden it's dealing with stuff that you're thinking about as a 16-year-old for the first time, probably, you know, like politics and yeah, using words like revolution, which you're listening to in your punk songs and stuff like that. I mean, this is just like the right book at the right time for me, for sure. Do you want to give me your first impressions before I ramble at length about
Actually, it's kind of hard to crystallize. I mean, we always try and do flaws, do nitpicks, and sort of approach it as if, like, Terry wasn't one of the great deities, despite obviously knowing that he was.
Be a short podcast if we didn't. Yeah.
Yeah. But so I was finding little I was keeping a note of little flaws. And I mean, there's some proofreading issues or some typos in my copy where things appear in the text and you know, it hasn't been done quite correctly. And there's other little flaws in structure, but none of them really bothered me. And the more I thought about it, so take this one, for example, you could cut a number of characters and scenes out of this book. Rosie Palm, wow, Mrs. Palm. A lot of the scenes with Madame Miserol, you could shave 100 pages off this by taking out a lot of those minor characters who aren't so well structured. But the timey-wimey comes into play. That this is a picture of a society with all those little vignettes, and why those figures might not be significantly noticeable as plot moments, as plot catalysts, they're absolutely important in painting the picture of this society as it changes, and Vimes' whole relationship of policing as a people actual people, not labels of people, but getting to know the people. It's what a lot of the story hinges on. So, I mean, I knew I loved this book from the get go, because the morning after we recorded our podcast, I went outside. I thought I usually pick up with a little read, even if it's only the first 10 pages of the new novel. And I had a lot to do that day, but I was on page 100 by the time it finished.
Yeah, brilliant. I actually read it straight after we did Morris. I read it before we did Hogfather, just because I've been so excited to reread it. And I mean, I can obviously reread it anytime I want. I'm a grown up, and I own an electronic and a physical copy of the book. But yeah, I've been busting for this book basically since we started the podcast. As I say, it's the book that brought me back to Discworld as a kind of a young adult rather than as a kid, I suppose, and I've never really put it down since. I think, reading it at that age, at that time in late 2002, post 9/11 with the Iraq War kind of looming, like everybody knew what was going to happen. 4 years since the Good Friday Agreement. I think the year before the St Andrews Agreement, like the sort of political situation in Northern Ireland at the time was still pretty raw. And, this is maybe the second time that sort of Terry Pratchett maybe caught me at a critical time in that process. First of all, probably with Jingo. Secondly, with Night Watch, in terms of like what the reality of that kind of politics is, of revolutions and things like that. And even though you say that you could absolutely trim characters and scenes from this book, I think like all the kind of the palace machinations, I think, does lend depth to that, does lend a bit of kind of reality to the fact that while this so-called revolution is happening on the streets, the real power brokering is still occurring in the palace. And I think, certainly once the kind of shine started to go off the first Stormont government and then renegotiation and a new agreement was going to be necessary, I think you kind of go, yeah, you can see parallels of that in our own life. And then, yeah, thinking about it now on the reread, just in terms of everything that's going on in the world as well. I mean, I guess there's never not something like this going on in the world, but yeah, just everything that's happening in the States, everything that's happening in Iran, it just feels this book is evergreen in a really depressing way, and that it's always going to be relevant.
Yeah, that was very much in my mind what we might talk over. There is that whole sociological tapestry. There's that thing where, I mean, despite being a lot of battles, this manages to be a story that's quite a lot of fun and quite funny, and then dreadfully horrible of the worst kind. And we've talked before in Guard's book specifically about approaches to policing and how that relates to Northern Ireland. So this came at a time when the old Royal Ulster Constabulary was being reformed as a Police Society of Northern Ireland.
Police Service of Northern Ireland. Yeah, I think that they would have been in their second year of existence probably by the time this came out. Very, very new. A lot of trepidation. Sinn Féin hadn't joined the policing boards at that time either, so there was kind of it wasn't guaranteed that police service was going to succeed.
And I mean, substantially, the PSNI went on to become an organisation praised by educators all around the world as one of the most successful incarnations of a post-conflict police force, reformed. I think it's quite interesting. I mean, you're maybe, about 10 years younger than me, PJ?
Yeah, I think so.
I was 25 or 26 when the Good Friday Agreement came in, and it's a very noticeable split in the Northern Ireland continuity. Despite, I mean, there was a thing in the Troubles where policemen had targets on their backs, and you'd hear kids at school would come up with swear terms for cops that went beyond your usual swear terms. Kids are going to go with cops in relation to being a conflict zone. But so I was aware of that on the one hand. I'm still very much aware of that idea of the traditional idealized Bobby, which is one Vimes tries to go with, is you can go up to a cop and ask them directions if you're lost, that sort of thing. So, yeah, and I noticed actually in the wiki there's allusions to Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities.
Yeah, which I will confess to not having read, to be fair. But yeah, I noticed that on Elspace as well. Yeah, I think it's brave of Terry to sort of grasp the nettle of political policing in Discworld, because Jingo sidesteps it slightly by making it a kind of a more of a military thing, more of a kind of governmental thing, rather so as an external issue for that society. Whereas obviously everything that's going on in Nightwatch is very much internal to Ankh-Morpork society. So to sort of grasp that nettle and to try to make an exciting, engaging, funny story out of that in a fantasy setting is quite a tall order, and it's high risk, high reward. I think he knows that he's capable of it now, having done Jingo, having done The Truth, those kind of books. It feels like they're kind of really setting the stage for this, and it's just like absolutely nailed, I think.
It's such. We'll come on to talk about the torture scene quite some length, I suspect. But it's also like there's a fan's wet dream here, isn't there? There's like the beginnings of genius move of making this a sequel to Thief of Time, and maybe even it seems something that's happened like direct sequel or overlapping.
Yeah, in terms of, I know it's maybe not a particularly simple matter to keep track of the timelines in either of these books, but the present day events overlap for sure. That we know. It's not something that he's really tried to do, I don't think, before, in terms of like overlapping, dovetailing continuity. We know like characters from one series will definitely crop up in the other, but the stories of the books have tended to be fairly standalone affairs until now. And as I said at the start, like I'm pretty sure I read these in the reverse order. I think I read Nightwatch before I read Thief of Time, and it's fine. It absolutely doesn't affect the reading of either of them. It's just like it's a nice little Easter egg in each book. We go, oh, that's the lightning that hit the tower, or oh yeah, that's the lightning that was meant to start the clock. It's again feels quite natural because we have plenty of crossover of characters running through the whole series. Like to have a little bit of crossover of plot 30 books later or whatever, 29 books later, whatever it is, that feels absolutely fine, completely natural for the series at this stage. And if you don't read either book, I don't imagine it would really matter that much either.
So I didn't notice the direct crossover until I was the one line stuck out at me, but I didn't connect together. This is potentially the same event. My reading was very much that this is just a freak magic storm, this sort of stuff that happens around the Unseen University. So it works fairly well as standalone. What we do get is a lot of Year Zero stuff.
Yeah.
We get a young Mrs. Palm, young Red Shoe, Colon and Nobby.
Veterinary is I particularly enjoy.
Oh, yeah. Downey is in there too.
That's right. Yeah. Like direct callback almost to Jingo actually with Downey. I mean, all that kind of stuff feels, to me at least, maybe I'm wrong, but all that kind of Year Zero prequel, legacy sequel kind of affair, that feels very much more prevalent in pop culture now than it did 24 years ago. So yeah, I can see. I don't want to give the game, or maybe I'm going to give the game away. Sorry. On the notes,
no
Andy's
spoilers from here on.
No, and on our notes, Andy's got pictures from Quantum Leap, and he's got pictures from Life on Mars. All these kind of time travel-y kind of
Two time traveling Psalms.
Yeah. I have. Oh God, I really did ruin that on you. Sorry. He put so much thought into that, and I messed it up. All the time traveling Psalms. So yeah, so the fact the fact that Terry was kind of leaning into that 24 years ago. I mean, even stuff like Batman Year One, like or when did that come out?
Yeah,
Like,
so that was, I think that was 86. And a lot of this does spring from that sort of comics that was, I think it was 86, 87, 88 was the comics grow up period,
yeah,
which modern superheroic retellings can't let go of that grim dark thing.
yeah. And this, I mean, this is probably as dark as a Discworld book's going to get in certain places, you know? So, yeah, it does feel a little bit like Terry is leaning into that kind of trope as well, but I think he does it well. And I think he also remembers to have fun with it and to kind of to ebb and flow the tone as he so skillfully does in all the books. But yeah, the stakes feel particularly high at times in this one in terms of like making sure all those characters that you just mentioned, making sure that they're well served. Like if you're gonna go and give backstory to the likes of Red Shoe or Mrs. Pan, that it's got to be good. You don't want to ruin a character that your readers have certain feelings about or have certain opinions about. You know, but it absolutely all works for me.
I mean, I was thinking this is a book I'd love to get to my father because he's going through a serious retiree reading phase of cop crime noir
Oh, nice.
pieces, and I wondered. Well, I suppose if I'm going to pawn off guards books on him, I need to maybe go further back. But would he get all this stuff in Night Watch that, I mean, is kind of loaded for a veteran reader like myself?
Yeah, if you can call yourself that now. Yeah,
And I mean, I think
that
this is somewhere where doing it chronologically and avoiding spoilers has really paid off.
yeah, for sure. I think it's such a shame in many ways because, like as I said, this is probably my favorite Discworld book, and it's you can't just hand it to somebody really and go
Really?
read that. I don't know. I think like I mean, I would imagine it's probably quite a good standalone book, but I think it benefits immensely from familiarity with Vimes' overall character arc. You know, since guards, and the kind
Yes.
of investment that we have in his relationship with Sybil as well, because they don't get to spend a lot of time together in this book, but the fact that their relationship hangs in the balance is really, really key to Vimes's character arc. So, yeah, I do think it would be doing the book a little bit of disservice to just read it standalone.
If this is one of your first Discworld novels, please let us know in the comments and reviews how you got on with it. Do you
Yeah, that would
think,
be interesting. Yeah, I'd be really, really curious to know if anybody, because it is like you said, it's an award-winning book. It's so highly, I think it's got nearly a perfect score on Goodreads as well. It's so well regarded. I could understand the temptation for somebody from the outside coming in and picking this book up first. So yeah, if anybody has done that, I'd love to hear from you.
the placing of it, Sam's child on the way, seems like there's something thematical going on more.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, for sure. I mean,
I'm not a parent, but you are, so
yeah, I mean, I would say probably around the time our first child was on the way, like you can't help but look inward, I guess. I don't know. I found myself like listening around that time, listening to a lot of the music that I used to listen to when I was a kid, back when I first read this book, actually. Rereading old books like this, you know, I think you don't want to let go of the person that you were in a funny way because you know, like when you're becoming a parent, you're going to become somebody different. You're going to become something else. Essentially, you're not just a standalone being anymore. So I think it is. It's a time for reflection, but I think for Vimes in particular, just in terms of what his arc has been, like if you think about what he was like when we first met him, you know, he was drunk, he was alone, he was in the gutter. Now he's the opposite of all those things, and but he knows that he has a kid. He knows that that's inside him. Like that person still kind of exists inside him, and the fear that if you have a child that you turn them into yourself. I guess that's part of it too, and to get a look of sort of a first-hand look of what that was actually like what were the situations that formed Sam Vimes into who he is. I think that to do that quite literally is an interesting proposition. I don't think I'm really nailing that,
Yeah.
but
I mean, it certainly bookends it very well, but I hadn't thought of.
I don't know. It is. It's
Yeah, I
you're
mean,
right.
it's a parental relationship with young Sam that he goes on.
Yeah, this idea that you could go back and tell yourself, go back to meet yourself at 16 and impart a load of wisdom that you would instinctually ignore anyway as a teenager. I think it's not a unique idea that Terry's had for sure. That's definitely come up. You know, what would you tell yourself? You know, if you could tell yourself one thing, what would it be? That kind of stuff. So, yeah, to put him literally in that position, I think a lot of writers would maybe not handle that quite as deftly as Terry does. And, you know, with that little pinch of cynicism that he always has, you know, that it's not just as straightforward as that and never ever would be in a Terry Pratchett book. I think, yeah, it works really well.
Before we delve inside the cover, I want to give a special mention to Paul Kitby's cover, which
Yeah.
geeks will know is modeled on Rembrandt's painting, The Night Watch, with various guards characters filling in the parts of that painting. And that's a lovely little Easter egg.
Yeah, it's one of the few, because I'm a bit of a Philistine when it comes to that, even though I work at an art college. But I do remember going to Holland and getting to see Night Watch for real in the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam. And it was pretty cool. Actually being able to get a reference, an art reference for once.
I think one of these characters about the center is Josh Kirby.
Ah, yeah, because this around the time he passed, or is he just
Yeah,
retired?
yeah, this is about I think several years after he passed.
Yeah, yeah, it's such a nice tribute. Do you want to read the first section?
I will read the first section. We typically break the book into 5 parts, which I know is sacrilege, but it helps us start to deconstruct, pull things apart, and look at them in more detail.
Nothing wrong with a 5-act structure, I don't think. Go for it.
Quantum Loop. On the trail of guard killer Carcer, a magical storm hits the university, knocking Vimes back through time. He proceeds to punch out Sybil's father, get arrested breaking into the university, and wake up in a cell next to Carcer. His guide in this journey is Luce, who appears in the form of a sweeper only Sam can barely understand. But it's something about keeping 2 timelines going, filling a John Keel-shaped hole and doing the job in front of him, so that one day he might find the Keel home.
Man, Quantum Leap. Good times. That's quite the effort that went into that reference is truly legendary. I hope there's some Quantum Leap fans listening. The little picture of Sam giving the thumbs up on the notes is like that's definitely directed at you, Andy.
We're going to bring you home, buddy.
He never did get home though, did he? Spoilers for Quantum Leap, I guess, but I don't think he ever did. One of those shows that because it got cancelled or whatever ends up with having a really bleak ending. Yeah, so as a setup, I think, you know, it hits the ground running in that way that these books often do. I kind of like that it doesn't bother spending a lot of time setting up Carcer and, you know, the kind of present day shenanigans. It's there to kick off a story for Vimes. It's not a story about Carcer, thankfully. And the set piece, like the opening set piece with the chase and the on the university and everything is so visual and so kinetic. You just go like, it feels like a step up even before the time travel stuff starts, like just in terms of pacing and in terms of stakes and just maturity, you know, Vimes' inner monologue and how like the prospect of the birth is introduced, you know, everything is just like in motion the whole time. It feels like such a good opening to me.
I got chatting to a few Discworld fans on the Discord for the Bad Nerds, Babylon 5 for the second time. Wonderful podcast. And one of them mentioned about Carcer being this incredible villain. And I kind of, even though I was in these first 100 pages, I kind of got it straight away. I could feel the terror, the menace of this character. But I wanna ask you a question,
Mm-hmm.
PJ. And throughout the whole of the book, who is Carcer? Do you what how would you describe him? What sort of person do you think he is?
Do you mean like, well, okay, yeah. So what I like about how Terry quite often does villains, Carcer's probably one of the best examples of it, is like, and actually Tea Time's another good example, you know, having just done Hogfather, where it's just like giving them, making them kind of like personable, but in a really unsettling way. So like he always mentions like that Carcer has the laugh. He has this little laugh, and he always plays innocent, and it's just like, you know, in your villain archetype, like villains always every villain has to perform certain functions, but you have this kind of little empty box for a personality, and I think a lot of writers just go with the default, you know, somebody who's angry, somebody who's maybe lonely, maybe, you know, somebody who's got like a serious dysfunction. Whereas Terry, I think, tends to fill that box with the one potentially redeemable feature of the villain. So like, even though Carcer's his least redeemable villain for sure, but the fact that he is just kind of willing to play it all off as a laugh, you know, he thinks he's just in a game, is like quite unique and quite scary. In the same way that with Tea Time, you know, it's his just like this focus, this interest he has. It's like figuring out how to kill things. It's like as an academic interest for him.
I mean, for tea time, maybe I think he wears that game thing on the inside, whereas Carcer, it's a projection, more
Yeah,
like
yeah,
Trump.
yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. And I think like in a, yeah, no, in a kind of post-truth society or whatever nonsense we're calling it now, like the idea of somebody like Carcer who is willing to just lean into the lie, as you say, like he knows what he's saying isn't true, but he's almost able to convince himself of it, and that's what makes him quite scary and quite dangerous. Yeah, I think that's a really astute observation.
I don't know so much that he's able to convince himself. And so I've a few thoughts on why I asked this question. So I was listening to the BBC audio drama collection,
Oh, nice.
which does a quite good job of, like most of the others, of condensing it, of recreating most scenes, but it's just a very sort of boiled down version. And in it, Carcer is played as a sort of a wild boy, eh? A bit of a friend, bit of a crazy, bit of a working class lad, right? And that wasn't who I had been reading at all.
Mm.
He seems to me a cold, malicious, actually very cunning figure. And I noticed towards the end of the book, Vimes calls him out as quite dumb, quite stupid.
Yeah, he's got one move. Yeah.
And I don't think he is. I think he's quite I felt he was quite cerebral. And the best I could figure out was there's a lot that Terry holds back that leaves him as a sort of villain for the reader to project upon.
Yeah, that's fair.
A bit of a blank slate where, and there's a bit of sort of almost like neutral writing going on, but certainly care with writing for the reader to conjure up a villain that will terrify them with Terry's direction.
Yeah. Trying to think a little bit about why specifically that kind of affectation. And I think, yeah, that kind of like that wide boy kind of shtick, like that Carcer does kind of pull that out a few times throughout the book, but it's not who he is, that's for sure.
He's constantly steps ahead of Vimes.
Yeah, but even just in terms of like who he is as a person versus like who he pretends to be for Vimes, I think like that is an interesting question and maybe something I haven't thought about enough. But you like I think there's a responsibility thing, possibly, where like Vimes feels responsibility for the city and for doing the right thing, whereas Carter kind of embodies the opposite of that, where it's just almost nihilism in a way, but it's like cheerful nihilism, where like he doesn't see kind of a point or purpose to anything. He doesn't have any kind of stake or responsibilities in the world, so he's just happy to be an agent of chaos within it. Doesn't feel any kind of connection to any other beings, and is just kind of unfettered then as a result. I think, yeah, it's interesting because it does come up as like Carter routinely comes up as one of the best, if not the best, Discworld villain. But there's no real backstory. There's not even that many scenes with him.
Yeah, I would just drop straight into the action. He's already killed a cop that we've met before and formed a friendship with.
So that I think, like you were saying, basically, that level of mystery that allows the reader to kind of fill in their own blanks, create a bit of a greatest hits of their own favorite villains or the things that kind of make them uneasy or scare them. I think is really clever because you could get bogged down even further. Like you say, this book already has a big cast. It's a whole kind of tale of two cities kind of thing going on in terms of the political situation once we get later in the book. So to then spend time explaining who Carcer is and how he got the way he is and stuff like that, it just feels unnecessary. And actually, by not doing that, this made this villain all the more memorable. So what else happens? Those first kind of scenes, the kind of the slight allusion to Terminator by going back in time and arriving back in time naked. Yeah, that's always fun. And I think if anybody can have a lot of fun with that, it's Terry Pratchett, but specifically Terry Pratchett writing Sam Vimes. Rocking up to Sybil's house naked and all the rest of it is just is glorious stuff. Well, does the city feel different? I think like he does quite a good job of making Eichmore Park, which I guess is meant to be what, like 30 years in the past?
Yeah.
25, 30 years in the past. Does a good job of making it feel different.
Yeah.
In this opening sequence as well.
Curfew is in play.
Mm-hmm.
It's changing the rules quite a bit.
Yeah, and I think just putting him literally on the back foot, leaving him there with nothing, and then sort of explaining the significance of Keel and Keel's murder and the fact, obviously, who else but Carcer has committed that murder, then it sort of sets the stakes for what needs to happen in this. Because like your allusion to the quantum loop and to Life on Mars, I think is really, really astute. Because ultimately, like, you can have a year zero story, you can have a flashback story, but like, there's no stakes in that if it's just a prequel. Obviously you need to set your timey-wimey kind of adventure conceit in place here. It's like, the picture starting to fade, your life as you know it is going to no longer exist. And again, I sort of feel that like he takes it right up to the wire. It sort of feels like the first sequence with Sam in the past verges on becoming hopeless, where like he literally has nothing. Nobody knows who he is. He's stuck in the past. Carcer is at large and has a step ahead of him. Like, what can he possibly do in these circumstances? And then that's when Lawther comes in.
Yeah, there's a book that hits the ground running in that respect. Lawther, this is third book with him, Small Gods, Thief of Time, and
yep, that's right.
And he's fun. He's a nice old man.
Yeah, and what I was just gonna say, it's the perfect use of an existing character, and it's not just like Lawther is a character that hasn't just popped in for a couple of scenes here and there the way Nobby and Colon do sometimes. Like, he is a significant player in each of his three novels that we've read so far. It's not, he's a very obvious sort of story device or just a deus ex machina for this kind of stuff, but I do think there's kind of more going on, especially now having reread Thief of Time and Night Watch in order. You understand a bit more about the mission of the monks and Lutze's specific place within that and his kind of unique philosophy and his unique approach to mending history.
Yeah.
So you kind of don't have to explain, although it is hinted at for sure that he's kind of running this operation off the books, as it were, and this is all very tenuous and high stakes, and
I mean, you could maybe say he's the Vimes or the Carrot of the monks.
yeah, I mean, he's definitely the Vimes rather than the Carrot of the monks, for sure. I don't see Carrot breaking so many rules or smoking so many cigarettes for that matter. So not being kind of burdened with the backstory of all that.
It took me to reread the whole sequence with the first sequence with Hugh and Lucy and Vimes to really try and sort of appreciate what it was, but I found it a hell of a lot easier to understand than in Thief of Time.
The time loop. That's right. I'm talking about when he gets Vimes to explain it to himself. Yeah,
you've got the preempting with Vimes talking to himself, and I thought that. I mean, it is a perfect continuum of those two sort of the guards and the time monks, right? Perfect.
Yeah.
But on first glance, I'm sure it didn't seem like a good idea.
It's a tall order in some ways.
How well Terry works, how hard he works, that it's so organic in the reading.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that sequence is exactly what you said it is there. It's kind of setting the table for how those two story worlds are going to interact, essentially. Like Luce and Vimes are two very larger than life characters. And basically what the kind of rules of engagement between their two worlds is going to be is very well set up in that little time loop kind of thing. And also it's just leaning into the tropes and foregrounding the tropes of the time travel story, isn't it? Like setting up, leaning into the paradoxes and all that kind of stuff and just going, yep, this is how it is. None of it really makes sense, but as long as it makes sense for the characters, that's all that really matters.
Yeah.
Part 2, guards. My name is Sam Vimes. I had an accident and I woke up in 1969. Am I mad, in a coma, or back in time? Whatever's happened, it's like I've landed on a different planet. So good. I miss Life on Mars. It's a great series. Anyway, here's what happens. Vimes talks Captain Tilden into promoting him from prisoner to Sergeant at Arms. After breakfast with Dr. Lawn, Sergeant Knock gets knocked. Court gets the boot. Coates gets a raise, and two Vimes walk the beat discussing clothing. Captain Swing and Rosie trade receipts. Neither are happy. Dibbler requires a business mentor. There's something else in his pie. But this time, it's a message. Nobby becomes a snitch. A tight. I feel we should say tight. We got to lean into her. Nobby becomes a tight. Tilden's missing inkwell leads to a locker search, but it turns up in his safe. To Vimes' guilt at the Assassin's Guild, Downey bullies a young reader called Veterinary.
Well, I mean, we're already kind of at that point where everything happens.
Yeah, but I mean, to be fair, like this takes us up to page 195. This takes us up to almost halfway through the book.
Yeah, intensely satisfying is Vimes' rise from prisoner to guy in charge.
Yeah, for sure, and
it just brings back. It's such a you see, I titled it late in the day to guards, and it just brings back that kind of reprise of Carrot joining the watch and what Carrot does and what that in turn galvanizes Vimes to do at that point that we also see in Men at Arms. Yeah.
As much as I enjoyed Carpe Jugulum, am I thinking of the right book?
Witches, vampires?
No, Vimes and Vampires. Have we done Vimes and Vampires yet? Vampires. What book was that? Or Werewolves? Whatever.
Yes, we've done that book.
Anyway, by the time Vimes gets to that place where he is a duke and he's off doing diplomatic stuff, by the time we got to the Fifth Elephant, I was probably getting over it a bit. I was like, Vimes is not the same Vimes that he was in Guards. He's a duke. He's a diplomat. He's got baby on the way. And then suddenly, like 100 pages into this book, you're right back into the world of Guards. The Night Watch is a complete shambles. Everybody's on the take. It's complete street level storytelling again. And that was kind of the buzz about this book. Like that's what it was going to be like. So yeah, I was so excited to get into this. And all these, I mean, it's a big cast of characters, like we were talking about the whole way through. But I think it has to be, especially in terms of the watch, given what we know, like with the curfew and everything, and like we need familiar characters who we know are going to survive because they exist in the future, or at least we have a fair idea what's going to happen with them. But you want to introduce some new characters who are going to be wild cards, who are going to kind of, keep you guessing in terms of how Vimes is going to deal with them. I think like the captain, for example, is a good example. Yeah, the crooked watchman, and we know how Symes wants to deal with him, or how he would deal with him in his time. How he has to do it differently here. It's great stuff. Yeah, again, Life on Mars, another very astute reference.
Watchmen that don't really find redemption.
No, and I think that's good. Yeah, I mean, as much as we kind of see Vimes' watch as a kind of sometimes a bit of an idealized version of what Terry wishes policing was actually like, in terms of Vimes' ideals. And yes, it comes up against reality quite a lot, but ultimately Vimes is the fantasy embodiment of a good copper. To continually remind the audience of kind of the other side of that coin, I think is it just makes everything feel a bit more gritty and a bit more real. That like not every bent copper is going to get their comeuppance. There is a certain level of bent copperness that even Vimes is willing to tolerate. Certainly in this situation, I think that really just makes it feel a lot more complete and a lot more nuanced.
What surprised me was that he, in hindsight, I guess, or towards the end of the book, looking back, was that he went down the route of corrupt senior commanders, certainly as much as the junior street level police.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think that's part of just that whole, two eyes wide open look at the kind of situation, and especially in the context of this, which is like the kind of dying breaths of an authoritarian regime. I think that's quite, let's say accurate, but like whether it's accurate or not, it's an important piece of that story world. In terms of like, if you've got this regime, if you've got this mad tyrant who's kind of clutching at the last straws of power, what sort of police force exists under those circumstances? And that police force that exists in that circumstance is inevitably going to be extremely corrupt. Right? So, yeah, I think the fact that he's kind of willing, even though this is a story about a good cop, it's about Sam Vimes, he's still willing to portray what an actual police force in that circumstance is probably going to be like, and it's not going to be good,
Yeah.
I mean, we haven't even talked about the unmentionables yet because of how unmentionable they are, perhaps. But your reference to Captain Swing there, I mean, they represent the absolute nadir of that, obviously. And yeah, the confrontation that beating them with bureaucracy feels like Sam Vimes taking a page from Carrot's book, maybe, using the paper trail against them kind of thing.
Yeah, there's certainly that sort of outside the box thinking going on in leadership, while Vimes isn't, he just embraces leadership from the outset. As soon as he can get out of that cell, he's going to be boss, and that speaks a lot to his character. That that leadership is something. It's something any of us can do, is take on that leadership role, and it's something that all of us must do to some extent or the other. And as it happens, Vimes is very good at it. He knows the dangers of the power of people who want to be leaders, and he's starting from a place of altruism, I guess, where leadership isn't something he necessarily wants, but he needs it because others need it.
Yeah, that's always been a kind of thing that's come up for Terry, isn't it? That and it is a relatively universal truth, but even though we all know this is true, we can't do anything about it, which is that the best leaders are people who don't want to be leaders. Like that I think it's probably accepted as a relatively universal truth, but only Terry Pratchett is so good at winding that into the fabric of his stories, of kind of putting characters in situations where that's tested and where it's proven to be true, and where it can be interrogated. And the fact that you've got, the kind of mirror opposite of Vimes in Captain Swing in so many ways, who's just like the antithesis of everything that Vimes believes a copper should be. And he's like basically written as an Indiana Jones Nazi with his like calipers measuring people's heads, and you just picture him with the little round glasses and inexplicable German accent in my head as well, for sure. I think you're setting up a really what inevitably pans out to be a really kind of satisfying conclusion, obviously, to that storyline. But that's another kind of evil that Terry is suspiciously good at writing. You've got Carcer as a particularly good villain in this, but I think Captain Swing is in some ways equally terrifying, potentially more terrifying, because he's got the apparatus of the state behind him. And then when they team up, when Carcer becomes part of the Unmentionables, it's just like the stakes are through the roof.
You've also got Quirk, and you've got Coates, or not Coates.
Yeah, well, Coates is there.
Well, Coates is in there, but in terms of leadership, Quirk's Knock is one of the other high-ranking ones. But throughout the book, I mean, he just doesn't stick to that treatment of leadership as good or bad. There's a number of the people opposed to what Vimes is doing who are rational men who recognize bastards when they see them, who don't want to cause trouble, but they're acting on orders. And they in themselves are, they're not mere ciphers. They've got their own sort of ways of critical thinking, of like Vimes thinking outside the box of how they can solve the problem without actually solve the problem in it. So
yeah, for sure. Although I think there is an element of that, the fact that those characters, the other Watchmen, are presented as just being like, real people, just normal people who go back to their homes at the end of the day, but quite crucially, who live in that neighborhood. That does kind of become a plot point later on, that these guys, for all their kind of normality, for all their willingness to just do the job, go home at tea time, follow orders, have a quiet life, that is a kind of a strength that Vimes uses later on, because he's able to turn around to the civilians and be like, well, these guys live in your community. They're just like you. They're human beings. They're people. I think it does kind of come full circle in that way, which is really nice. It works really, really well.
You've also got, I want to talk about Dr. Lawn.
Oh, yeah.
And Rosie Palm, or Mrs. Palm. I did myself a few mental checks while reading, Mrs. Palm. And I didn't really get with Rosie Palm as much as I felt I could have, but it's interesting that she is initially the damsel who saves Vimes, and then later the one who is done wrong by him, I guess, which nicely illustrates that societal tapestry, the story of justice kind of thing, and policing, and community policing, which is all over this book.
Yeah, for sure.
And Dr. Law. So sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say about Rosie and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, the fact that she doesn't. This is the most we've ever seen of her, and it's in the past. Like, I think he has possibly been like looking for an excuse to explore, because this is a character that's been appearing for well over a decade in Discworld at this stage now, and even though you're right that the story could potentially work without her, certainly without like her extended scenes and her involvement with the Palace conspiracy and all that kind of stuff, I just get the impression that he's probably had this backstory or this version of her in his head for a while, because it comes out quite self-assured, and like you sort of mentioned, no better foil for her than Vimes, and the relationship between that guild in particular, a guild of prostitutes, with the police is going to be a pretty interesting relationship, one would imagine.
I mean, there's another thing, the ambition for this guild to become formalized, and the conditions that it's not under Winder, They hope it will be under a snapcase, and Vime says you've honestly no chances. I mean, there's a whole little sort of societal path for want of progress. Discourse very own suffragettes, uh,
Yeah, yeah,
and it's
good point.
achieved
Yeah,
very economically. It's maybe in a couple of pages. Not,
yeah, that's true.
yeah,
And
that's world
this
building, folks. So it's done.
indeed, and indeed it is, and it's possibly a sneaky little retcon in some ways, which these little Year Zero stories tend to love. Which is that, are we suggesting here that this idea of the guilds, the criminal guilds, essentially becoming legalized, which is, we know what happens under veterinary, is this possibly actually more of Rosie Palm's doing, or is it as much Rosie Palm's doing as it is veterinaries? I think that's possibly a stretch, but like, it's fun to think about. There's
Do
little
we
hints
get
of that.
any guilds? Do we get talk of any guilds apart from
Just
the Guild of
just
Assassins?
the Assassin's Guild, really, yeah.
Yeah.
So basically, what is well established Discworld canon at this stage is that, yeah, the idea of crime essentially being legal, of the Thieves Guild, the Beggars Guild, and all that kind of stuff being legalized, that has always been basically stated outright to be the policy of veterinary. That's what made his reign different.
Veterinary
So
always has like community governance.
yeah, I mean, he's the ultimate realist, and it is kind of fun actually to see him in this book as a younger man, and kind of taking orders and stuff like that. Again, yeah, the Downey relationship is a fun one as well. Yeah, actually, when I was talking about a callback to Jingo, I wasn't thinking of Downey. I was thinking of Rust, Lord Rust, who comes in later on in the story, but we'll get to him.
Yeah, I really enjoyed reading that little paragraph, which I think is just at the end of this recap, where it's the Downey veterinary thing, and the paragraph just ends with, well, summarized that that student's name was veterinary, and it was just such a lovely little
Yeah, it's a good
frame
way to
of
introduce him, because I think
yeah.
you know
Yeah.
we we've seen in the setup that veterinary is wearing he's wearing the flower, so we know that he's going to crop up somewhere, and we're in the Assassin's Guild, and we're thinking, where is he? And then yeah, that just nice little reveal at the end of that sequence.
I don't refer to Dr. Lawn again in these notes. So I just wanted to pause and bring out how much I enjoyed those little scenes between Vimes and Lawn. Although he's not privy to what's gone on, he does act as a very good confidant for Vimes.
Yeah, and like that, just that the reality of these situations where people are going to get hurt and people are going to die, and somebody like Lon, exists in all these situations, and you'll be plenty of people in our community who've rolled up their sleeves and tried to help people, after certain incidents of violence, and it's not always it's not always so orderly that an ambulance will come up and bring you to hospital. It's ordinary people helping ordinary people. That's the only kind of way often to survive these kind of situations. So to have a character like Mossy Lawn, which is a good character name, very Dickensian, actually. To have that, to sort of make him a bit of a focus, I think is good. It really fleshes out that perspective of the street level life under these kind of conditions.
And the runners up for favorite scenes is the introduction of Nobby.
Yeah.
I think one of the Terry did quite a good list of top introductions of Nobby, or descriptions of Nobby, more to the point, and I think this is one of the top ones, certainly.
Yeah, it's great just to be fleshing out a bit more. I mean, Nobby started as such a kind of almost a one-note joke, but now, like in Hogfather, like we learned a bit more about his childhood, and then we're seeing his childhood play out here, and God, this got real depth, and like you could really feel for him, and like how he was treated by his dad and everything like that. And
Listening back on the audiobook, I mean, and you must know this as you've read this multiple times, you get all the sort of in the little illusion, the things that trying. Sorry, I'm being confused by timey-wimey. The little illusions in the present day sequence that are explained later in the book, like Nobby's spoon.
yeah,
It's really, really pay off on that second listen or second read, or more thoughtful bit where Nobby's just like, yeah, he gave me a spoon. And that's in the bulk of the text, that's quite a big deal.
Yeah, for sure. And then
Nobby.
what you're really then going to ask yourself after the third or fourth reading is whether Nobby remembers John Keel giving him the spoon or whether he remembers Sam Vimes giving him the spoon. You know, it's that old Matrix moment. But anyway, yeah, it's good stuff. It's really well written. I think this kind of book is in danger, especially when you're 30 books into a series, of just leading into stuff like that, fan service for the sake of fan service, and there's none of that. Absolutely none of that in here. All that stuff, all the backstory, either serves the world building, serves the character development, or serves the plot, and usually it serves at least 2 out of the 3 of those things. So yeah, it's a really, really high bar. It's making me want to go back and watch Life on Mars. This is the second time Life on Mars has come up for me this week. Can't remember exactly why. But yeah, that intro, that was nailed on in terms of like setting the scene, hitting the ground running. God, there mustn't have been a lot of time between those. When did Life on Mars start? It was a good
2006 or 2007.
Yeah, so like not too far after this, like you can kind of see how somebody might have gone, "Ooh, that's a good idea." Yeah, that'd be a good TV series.
For those who don't know, Life on Mars is a wonderful British. Essentially, it's a writer's dream of a cop drama from the days of the 1970s, and the story revolves around John Sim playing a modern day police officer who is thrown back in time to the 1970s, where dirty cops and police brutality are all things, and
Sounds
two
familiar.
methods kind of playing off one another. And it's quite enjoyable, very funny, a lot of British pop cultural infusion in a kind of way that Stranger Things has been doing for 1980s America.
True.
So yeah, top recommendation there.
Yeah, it's a great series. Sequel series is pretty good as well. Ashes to Ashes. It was decent too. Anyway, enough plugging other people's stuff. Do you want to read part 3?
Part 3, The Watch House. Carcer is promoted, triggering a siege of Treacle Mine Road. Prisoners are taken, and Vimes stops short of ginger beer torture. Veterinarian Rosie arranged for his audience with Madame Messerole. Ned Coates is trained and walks. Vimes walks to set Monk's minds to work. Swing delivers news Tilden has been replaced with Rust, who gives out marching orders. Hold the line.
Yeah, so this, like, I know we said in the last section that, like, yep, it's all happening, but like this middle section of the book so this kind of, 200-ish pages from page 100 to page 300 is just like so tense.
Yeah.
Like you really feel like the powder keg nature of the city. You feel how it's affecting the characters. You feel how it's affecting Vimes. Every little escalation just like winds the story tighter and tighter and tighter.
I mean, it kicks off with essentially the siege of the Watch House. Pure Vimes doing out of the box thinking of really sort of innovative solutions to problems that on the surface look quite insurmountable. Always with such simple dispatch and comic payoff.
Yeah, absolutely. Like that, it can be quite
as comic as injuries can be.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. When they're happening to Nazis, it's fine. So I think they're in a situation. Well, in a lot of these kind of books, I guess, like you have that kind of temptation to do the kind of Sherlock Holmes thing, where you've got investigator, a character who's smarter than everybody else, and they just get to be a step ahead of everyone else, and they get to do cool shit like this. But at least in this story, there's a justification for it, because Vimes has lived all this before, so he is literally a step ahead of everybody else. So when he does things like when he sets the traps for the unmentionables, he does whatever he does to the privy window so they fall in, and like it's fine. It doesn't feel like he has an unnatural advantage, because he actually has a natural advantage within the world of the story, and that this is his second go around. But he has literally done this before, or he was there at least when it was done before. So And yeah, like I said, and because the people he's doing it to are such horrible bastards, it's very enjoyable. It's a very cathartic sequence.
Well, do you know what was in my thoughts more? The running joke of the Assassin's Guild sending someone to knock him off that seems to start a lot of the books.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I don't
It's
know.
very, yeah, resonant.
I don't think I'd thought of that before, but yeah, he now has this like decade of experience of setting traps for assassins. So he can go back in time, put it to good use on the unmentionables. Yeah, that's a really, really good point. I suppose at some stage, might as well be now, we're going to have to talk about the ginger beer trick.
Yeah. So yeah, the ginger beer trick. Quite a fun little sequence. And I was almost going to write the note in my notes of ginger beer boarding as a pun on waterboarding. I thought that might be in bad taste. I mean, this actually
Ginger boarding, ginger bearding. Yeah, something in that. I don't know. Workshop it.
um the use of waterboarding in Guantanamo Bay, I think, would have been a year or two after this was published.
I mean, it certainly wouldn't have come to light. I don't think. Yeah.
There's actually, on the less funny side, there's a note in the Wikipedia or the Elspeth's annotations as regards to this.
How much is this going to upset me? Because I haven't actually looked at this.
Yeah, considerably.
Okay.
There was confusion as to which bodily orifices are involved. Terry said, "To see the debate running wild, I've heard this attributed to the Mexican police as a cheap way of getting a suspect to talk, and which happily does not leave a mark. The carbonated beverage of choice was Coca-Cola, hint expanding bubbles and the sensitivity of the sinuses. I seem to recall a brief shot of something very like this in the movie Traffic. But both Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch confirm that this is a kind of torture is regularly reported as being used by the Mexican police, which, yeah, does take the fun out of it. Vimes doesn't obviously go that far. It's more the threat and the use of the phrase carbonated drinks.
Yeah, that's quite dark. It's about as dark as I was expecting. I suppose it could have been. It's a shame to say that it could have been worse, but goddamn, yeah. So yeah, I mean, it gets into some as fun and as cathartic as it is. You know, him getting one up on the unmentionables a couple of times in this sequence, like just the sheer existence and the more exposure we have to them and how they go about their business, and Swing and Carter become kind of closer compatriots in this section. Like, it really feels like this is a quite a thing for Vimes to overcome, if he can overcome them, in terms of like we're immediately asking ourselves here, like what's going to happen with Swing? Like, what's going to be the outcome of this? You know, he's torturing all these people. He's a completely irredeemable character, but he's not the mission. The mission for Vimes is to basically survive this and get home.
Yeah.
So the question is, how is he going to deal with it? Is he going to deal with it? And if he does, is it going to derail his mission to get home? You know, that's where the stakes come from in this, and they're set sky high here.
At this point in the book, it what we will say about Swing's torture chamber is very much still behind closed doors. We're still very much with the ginger beer sequence. It seems like Terry. Well, I was thinking, and the continuity doesn't hold up. That Terry is sort of saying, "Well, why not? You know, why waterboard somebody when you can give them a bottle of fizzy drink, but it's all been shaken up beforehand?" um, I mean, it puts me very much in the scene that opens up The Wire, season 5, where the police try to pass off the youngster by duct taping them to a photocopier, which is spitting out sheets that are yes and no, trying to convince this juvie that the photocopier is a
lie detector. Yeah.
Very much in that sort of school. So the actual the heaviness of this is very much behind closed doors as a new reader coming to it.
Yeah, no, sure.
I mean, that's, I guess, also for a lot of people, that's the way this terror works. that they don't see it, they don't learn about it
Yeah, yeah,
until it's too late.
yeah. And what and this, the regime holds power through fear, like that. That's very clear in both in this story and generally speaking, under these circumstances. So the idea, whatever the unmentionables can do to you in real life, probably is only a fraction of what they can do to you in your mind. What, like, all the horrible things you could imagine. And then to turn that back on them and make one of them imagine the worst thing possible with the ginger beer. I think that's, again, very cathartic, very, very satisfying.
Yeah, again, a bit of a Vimes trademark
Yeah.
in his way of dealing with crims. Yeah, I mean, I wasn't really thinking that when I was reading it. I was just
Yeah.
thinking, oh, this is fun.
Yeah, and it is, but like, yeah, but you're bang on there. Vimes consistently walks right up to that line, but never crosses it. So it's one of the kind of, it's probably the North Star, I guess, of his character. Like, so yes, to have him that in that circumstance with such inarguably awful people, but he still doesn't cross the line. And every time I read it, like, I've read it so many times. I've read it at least a half dozen times, probably more. Like, every time I read that sequence and you get to the reveal that he didn't do it, it's still like, it's a big cheer moment. Like, Vimes didn't cross the line. He stayed true to himself, but he still got the results that he needed to get. Yeah, it's great. Good sequence.
Madame Messerule offers him a promotion, which would put him back on track to the futurist Vimes just a lot early. And it's something he turns down for various reasons.
Yeah, I mean, I can see your point here in that, like, how important to the plot does this seem? I mean, in terms of Vimes' journey, it does feel a little bit redundant. Like, he knows exactly where he needs to be in this timeline to basically make it fit, to make to make Kale's storyline essentially fit his version of the timeline so that he can go back home to the real world. So, like, the idea that he would be tempted by a promotion just rings kind of false to me. I'm not,
It seemed to me he's reading the promotion offer more as a sort of a
bribe,
trap or a bribe,
yeah,
than any kind of empowerment. And another thing that occurs to me is there's very few times throughout this book where he is thinking directly, or as presented to the reader, of Sybil, of having, and actually, one of the times it happens in the bulk of the book is quite late, and he chastises himself for not thinking of Sybil.
Yeah, for sure.
So long.
Yeah, and it's totally telegraphed in how kind of alive he feels, and all the stuff that happens before he goes back in time, like all the stuff, all the paperwork and stuff, and this pomp and ceremony of the present day that we know that he hates. Like, this is him. He's like a pig in shit when he gets back to the past in many, many ways. Like, he's enjoying himself even when he's in these really tight spots. And I think it's in the section where he gets the cigar case back, isn't it?
It's around here, yeah.
Yeah, because that's kind of the big moment of reconnection, I think, isn't it? For Vimes in the past, making sure that we know that he does want to be Vimes. He wants to be the person that he is in the future again. And that whole sequence of him using his feet, because that's been a Vimes trope since Guards. Like, that's a real callback. Yeah, I thought every time I read that, just makes me smile.
Yeah, in this instance, it feels, in this novel, it feels particularly vivid, and of course actually plays off in the finale when we get him running through the streets, and it's not just bare feet.
Yeah, it's a bit of an extravagance. Like, I think he spends maybe a page more on it than he needs to, but, like, if any character has earned that, it's Sam Vimes. Yeah.
Oh, so we get the Ned Coates training session, and Ned's another of those characters who kind of his story. I mean, he's a really interesting character. I really enjoy Ned Coates, and such a great name too.
Yeah,
he's one of those characters that his story just kind of seems to end when Vimes' story in the past ends, which is a whole. We'll come to it, but it feels like a very anticlimactic thing, which doesn't really bother me anyway.
Yeah, I think what it does do though, it sort of underlines the feeling that there is a larger world here. It's not like the past that Vimes has gone back to isn't just his past. It's the past of Ankh-Morpork. It's a living, breathing city going under, some pretty. It's going through a revolution essentially. Yeah. So the fact that people like Mesrol and Coates have their own agendas, and we're only privy to a small percentage of that, just makes the world feel a bit bigger, I think.
It's a really well fleshed out character portrait, and it's around this time or the next part that we get something similar done with Red Shoe, who makes him a much more interesting character that I'll be looking for in the future.
Yeah, the fact that Reg is this kind of failed revolutionary who's essentially become a zombie just through sheer force of will is like, yeah, it's not a retcon, but it's like it's backstory that never existed, since we first met him way back when. But like you said, it fleshes him out to such an interesting
Reg is
degree.
Much more interesting to me than the zombie Reg of present times, who does feel a bit stiff and a bit boring on occasion.
And the fact that he went from this to becoming a cop after he died, I think like that's a significant distance and has been trodden in his character journey to get there, which is pretty cool. It's pretty interesting.
Vimes visiting the monks, and I thought this was a really interesting sequence because it seemed to me that so he was the man going in there with a mission, and Lao Tzu and Q were very much kind of the mind of providing reassurance to Vimes. It was going something that they were going to work out. But it seemed that the resolution of that sequence was it felt like Vimes had talked some sense into them to get their act together. Is that how that felt to you? And just hurry up and get things moving?
A little bit, yeah. I think if anybody has the strength of character in Discworld to kind of go toe to toe with the history monks, obviously it's Vimes and vice versa, I guess.
Yeah, 100.
Part of me does think that this sequence is a little bit engineered. Like the idea for him finding his way there, just using his feet, is possibly as much of a reason to have this sequence as the subsequent confrontation with the monks. I also think the idea of the Zen garden with like the cigarette ends in it and all that kind of stuff, I feel like that's possibly a leftover idea from Thief of Time. It feels quite of that book, I think.
We do get the backstory of the is it the Shonky Shop it's called?
Yeah,
where the school uniforms would have been bought, and I find that another lovely little bit of texture. But you're entirely right when you say if any character can go toe to toe, because Lao Tzu is quite the alpha, I think, when it comes to cerebrality and persuasiveness. And yeah, I can't think of anybody else who could at least hold their own with him or better him than Vimes.
Yeah, well, these two characters, and I guess, well, except for Death, maybe, are the characters that tend to be a step ahead of everybody else in Discworld. So yeah, bringing them together totally feels natural. And yeah, I like the sequence, and I think the fact that it does, they get him his cigar case back. They realize that he needs help, and you're like, oh geez, if Vimes needs help, and we're only, we've still got a third of the book left, or we've still got a quarter of the book left to go, and like he's already kind of wavering. Like this is a big moment for him, but it also sort of serves to raise the stakes in some way. Like we know that the big confrontation is now imminent, which maybe leads us nicely into part 4. Shall I do it? Part 4, the people. Captain Rust has a sudden attack of insanity, necessitating Vimes giving the orders for the barricades to be moved. A raid on the Unmentionables headquarters reveals a torture chamber, which Vimes burns to the ground with daring interventions. The barricades move, aided by an influx of new recruits and food. Corsair exerts pressure on military command, with Nobby captive in the mix. A Big Miri explodes. So action. Now this is like promise of the premise type stuff, like proper revolution underway. Yeah, getting rid of Rust, knocking out the officers, like switching sides essentially. Like it's been the tension of the whole last two sections has just broken, and now we're into the good stuff, right?
Yeah, I guess we talk about the whole barricades generally because there's so much. This is where the social tapestry thing comes alive, where community policing as a subject matter pays off as like full on plot mechanics story. And I mean, I think it's a little later on after that, but I love the little sequence where one of the guards from an opposing faction is threatened by their grandmother that they'll tell stories about them of what they did when they were 10.
Yeah, yeah, all that stuff. Yeah, that we talked about earlier. That like the fact that the guards are just people from that community, you know. And then we sort of get introduced a bit, I guess, the regiments. We've heard, you know, about these massacres that have been conducted by the regiments that have been deployed. They sort of happen off screen, as it were. Earlier in the story, we hear about what happened to Dolly's sisters, and then I think there's another kind of cavalry charge or something like that. And then we know that this inevitable military confrontation is probably going to happen. But there's a distinction drawn between. Oh well, no, it is actually like because the regiments, like it's even I think it's soldiers are getting taunted by their grannies and stuff too, aren't they? So there actually isn't really any distinction drawn there, which is interesting.
And it's just Terry's so good at writing this sense of dread that we get. That Vimes' watch house is the only one that has escaped trouble, and the higher ups are
Suspicious.
prepared to sort that out.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can't
So
help.
you know that the wheels are going to come off the cart any moment, but of course, literally the wheels do come off the cart. It's just not the one the higher ups intended.
Yeah, and I mean it can be kind of uncomfortable reading in some ways for us, I guess, like reading about the army being deployed against the people on against barricades and stuff like that on the streets, because that's obviously the stuff that really happened here within our kind of or within the very recent cultural imagination. But it is, you still kind of have a nice little, just a kind of straight up action sequence, I guess, with the, what do they call it? The Big Miri or whatever. Yeah, like the siege engine that the Vimes sabotages, and he has this little daring foray into enemy territory and stuff. And like, it's just fun to read. It's well executed, well told. Little adventure sequence, I guess. You know, the book, we don't want to by any means suggest that this book is all just kind of social realism and political commentary. Like it's a fun adventure as well, you know.
I mean, in terms of the sort of the communities gathering around the barricades to where it's a point of citizens cooperating with Watch, and there's an awful lot of chatter around it. I mean, Red Shoe is kind of he's a joke. He's a this sort of the what Alexi Sales of this, but it feels very authentic and kind of thinking about our own situation in Northern Ireland would remind me of stories that I've heard of people on protest marches, and I guess anywhere in the world protest.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I like
civil rights and civil disobedience.
Yeah,
Just forming, enhancing community, forming and growing relationships.
Yeah, like even this week, like seeing like the antis coming out and handing out free samosas at the anti-ice protests in Minneapolis, and yeah, I think of the original, the early days of free dairy before everything that happened there happened, and I guess Barcelona and I'm sure Terry would have been familiar with Orwell's writing about Barcelona during the Spanish Revolution and stuff like that. You sort of feel the influences of all those things, but equally like his cynicism for ideologues, his cynicism for romanticism of I mean, it's not even subtext here, it's text. Vimes comes out and basically says it, about having the wrong type of people and all that, and the cyclical nature of revolutions and stuff. Like his eyes are open to that stuff, but like he still sees the humanity in these situations and still sees the value in them, I think, to quite a large extent. The most Terry Pratchett concept in this book creeps up here. Just like, his innate habit of just like taking a relatively straightforward idea and then pushing it to its logical extreme. So this idea of what if the city inside the barricades became bigger than the part of the city that's outside the barricades? What happens then? Like that's that's the logical extreme of this kind of situation, isn't it?
And jumping ahead, really, that sets us up for a lovely pun in the next part where Winder is replaced by Snapcase, where they say, well, actually now we are the establishment and
Yeah.
the other side of the rebels. So
Yeah.
what are you going to do about that?
Exactly. And that sort of, here comes the new boss, same as the old boss sort of energy is brought into that, but it's played totally for laughs, which is great. I suppose this battle, if I recall correctly, the battle with Big Mary and everything is the Discworld, literally the Discworld equivalent of the Battle of Cable Street, isn't it? Like that's where it takes place in Discworld.
Oh, I never got that before.
Well, definitely Cable Street.
The Battle of Cable Street, the anti-fascists.
Yeah, well, Cable Street definitely.
20s or 30s.
It was in the 30s. Mosley. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and Cable Street, we've got our.
That's so clever.
We've got our helpful map here. Yeah, Cable Street definitely. Yep, exists. Yeah, that's where the.
Yeah.
Oh no! So Cable Street is where the unmentionables are in the story. So the battle of Cable Street in this story is when they storm the unmentionables.
Yeah.
Barracks. Yeah, so it's not this battle of the barricades, but a battle of the Discworld does have a battle of Cable Street, and I mean, that's such a 1-to-1 reference to a real event.
Parallel. Yeah.
Yeah, you can really kind of see where his kind of thinking about all this kind of stuff lies, and that kind of pre-war. Which again, I mean, so 1934, also around, just a few years before the Barcelona Revolution, the Catalan Revolution as well, that kind of spontaneous revolutionary or community kind of action, I guess, is very much on his mind when he's drawn his version of that, I guess, for Discworld.
Yeah, it's a Nazi torture chambers, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, and the reference to all the measurements and stuff. I can't even remember what that was called, like that Nazi science of measuring people and stuff. All very creepy, terrible stuff. Yeah, I think that the parallels are very, very clear in this story for sure. And
a friend is visiting Poland in a week or two, and he's booked in to go around Auschwitz. And it was a bit of a source of argument between a few of us. One was just sort of absolutely dead set, don't go. You'll just be haunted by this sort of stuff. And I mean, I've looked around a history of Polish Jews, like a history museum, and that was quite chilling in places. So, I mean, my own personal take is I don't see the point in visiting some of these places where just absolute horrors have been created. That's my own personal sort of approach, because it does nothing for me but bring more pain at there's nothing that I think would be advantageous.
Yeah, it's an odd one because I have gone to different places like that. I've never been to Auschwitz, but I've been to the Anne Frank house in Amsterdam, and I've been to the Unit 571 Museum in Harbin in China, where the Japanese conducted all their kind of atrocities. And I don't regret going to either of those places, but I certainly didn't enjoy going to either of them either. I think there's just something about, like, I don't know what it is, if it's like something in terms of just witnessing it, just sort of like acknowledging it, or like, but there's no rationale to it. I don't know. Certainly seeing all the shoes, like all the leftover shoes, or the first time that why are we talking about this? It's so depressing. the video of when Anne Frank's dad came back to the house and realized that he was the only one who survived, like that was just the most fucked up thing because you're standing in the space where that happened, watching the video of it happening, and it's just absolutely devastating. But yeah, so I kind of get like why you might not want to subject yourself to that, and I don't know what the definite benefits or purpose of it is either, but like stuff like this, I think, more kind of allegorical warnings, more kind of cathartic ways of dealing with those events, I think are definitely more useful. Like, I think this book, like I'll reread this book. I've read this book a minimum of 6 times now. I'll probably read it another couple, and that teaches me everything. I think that you can learn as much from that as you can from visiting these real life places, and arguably you're more likely to revisit it because it's going to be less traumatizing.
Yeah, and this makes the same point that this is a horrible place, horrible things happened here, things that even the word horrible doesn't even begin to, there are no words that can adequately describe it, and Terry tries to give words to those things.
Yeah. And it's the power of story. Is it? That's that. Yeah.
If not, the sensation.
Yeah.
That it's not good, and it should never happen again. But it will tomorrow.
Yeah. I mean, and it's probably right now, but like that is to be like one of the big distinctions, one of the power of good storytelling, good fictional storytelling versus just documentary storytelling. Whether, obviously all those experiences, these historical experiences are worthwhile and have their place, but I think nothing will stay with you as long as a good story, and a good story with the right message will stay with you much longer, I think. And this is definitely one of those stories.
And Terry's given us some horrible shit in Discworld. That's that's some of the scariest, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we're straight up into like state sanctioned torture in a fantasy comedy series at this point. But like, if you try to pitch that to somebody and like explain to them how well handled it is and like what a seamless part of this story in this world, he's able to make it. Like they wouldn't believe you. It has to be kind of read to be believed.
I mean, actually, again, so very prescient. Guantanamo Bay, a year or two after this.
Yeah, absolutely. Like if you think it's insane to think that he was probably writing this book, well, because he wrote quite fast. He's probably writing it early 2002, maybe mid to late 2001. But like we saw with Jingo, yeah. We knew, like he knew the writing was on the wall. Like unbelievably prescient writing. And I think he was. I was thinking about this actually while we were having a quick break. The term that always sticks with me, I think I just saw it in a Tumblr post or something about Terry, but his kind of worldview, and it was summed up by this idea of militant decency. That like he had a really good sense of what was right, and he was really, really, and it's not red shoe. It's not this big romantic idea of revolution. It's just literal decency. Just people should be decent to each other. That's kind of the height of it. And the fact that he's constantly disappointed by people in that disregard, I think does really feed into a lot of these books. And then you can see it here, writ really, really large. That like all he kind of wanted from the world was for people to be halfway decent to each other, and they couldn't even manage that. Yeah.
There was a line about don't measure up other people because they'll always disappoint you.
Yeah.
I really like militant decency.
I can't take credit for it.
To be.
Yeah, and that's such a constant through line, and I think like it really, it reaches some pretty high stakes in this one because like decency is completely broken down in this society at this point. Anyway, yeah, there's got to be a satisfactory, a happy ending after all that, Andy, right?
Back to the future. Lord Winder eats his last cake. The barricades come under attack. Snapcase breaks the amnesty. There's commotion in Mrs. Soupson's shop. Vimes takes his men over the barricades to Carcer. The monks work their magic, and Sybil gives birth to a boy named Sam. At the graveyard, Vimes makes a daring arrest.
Indeed. So, as great as satisfying as this conclusion is, uh, it does have that kind of fifth elephant, kind of, one you think it's over, then it's not. Like one final confrontation with the villain, and it's kind of, it's good structure. It's fine. I'm happy with it. I'd sort of, now that we've been rereading these, you can sort of see the patterns in them a little bit if you're reading one every month, especially with Vimes. But we've been waiting so long. It's a good lengthy character journey that he's been on through this, and to give it that last little push, that last final confrontation with Karsha, I mean, it does feel well earned. And it's standalone storytelling.
It's different in terms of structure. There's no doubting the final battle with Karsha is a hold off. But it's really interesting in how it ends. I mean, we've had most of the book, certainly from our second, third, fourth act and part of the fifth, it's just battle, battle, battle. And it kind of, where Vimes' pull and Karsha go back to the future, I only noticed when I was rereading it for the synopsis, it is in an over the barricades sort of way. Think of the end of Blackadder when they go for the top and freeze frame, or Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid.
Yeah.
And it's at that point, the point that feels like it should be the peak of the climax, or the peak of the war, if you like. And then that is all just, rather than resolving that, which is what a Discworld book would usually do, it's just stopped, paused.
Yeah.
It's everything, all the sets and the characters, everything is shifted. Just,
yeah. I know I jumped the gun by bringing that up, but I mean, even the whole build up to that with with Snapcase's betrayal, inevitable betrayal, Kershaw inevitable betrayal of the barricades and of Keel, that kind of inherent distrust of authority, or certainly people who lust for authority that Terry has. It really does feel inevitable that was always got to be the case. And I did sort of think that because that feels like we all saw it coming. Seasoned Discworld readers will have seen it coming, but because it does feel like a little bit of a twist. And then the deferred confrontation with Karsha, like I do feel maybe in some ways this ending it's dragged out a little, not to the point of breaking by any means, and definitely is tense the whole way through, but this book is so tense the whole way through. I don't know, maybe I think possibly as well reading it under the current political climate, global political climate, where it's like you just want things desperately to be okay for Vimes and for Ankmore Park, and they're just not going to be.
And when Snapcase and Karsha each working with one another break the amnesty, I mean, you can't help to think about Israel and the so-called ceasefires.
Exactly, right.
How obvious that breaking of the truce, was to anybody watching. And
and even this latest thing, this very tenuous excuse for the Americans going into Venezuela, all that kind of stuff. It's just like, it's writ so large in the world, and like, I mean, reading it now maybe it's a little bit different, even though like things were, 2002, like things were about to take a bit of a dark turn, just, on the eve of the invasion of Iraq and stuff like that. But I think it took another couple of years for that quagmire to develop and for it to become the real cynical, to be exposed for the real cynical kind of move that it was, and for all the kind of misery and pain that came after that. I think, to read it now, 2026, compared to reading it in 2002, feels different. But then every time, that's what's so great about these books, every time I reread them, reread them at different points, they never don't feel prescient. It's just always in a different way. They're so evergreen and like that, so well observed, such a good observation of human nature, I think, because human nature doesn't ever really change that much, or at least isn't ever going to change that much in a 25-year span, that these books won't never not be relevant then.
That betrayal by Snapcase in the plot is so thematic to what Vimes is arguing through the book of
True.
the sort of the upper classes of management type, the aristocracy just betraying the common man. I'm starting to sound like Red Shoe, aren't I? Um, and yet, so that's it's the manifesto made manifest.
Oh yes, quite so, quite so. Yeah, and that yeah, I mean that's a good. Even though I mean, as I say, it's presented as something of a twist, but I mean the groundwork for it is very very well laid. It's not in any way extraneous. Very much fits the theme and the thesis of the story, as you say. So yeah, I mean, I'm really kind of I'm reaching for criticisms at this stage. I don't
Yeah.
really have any genuine criticisms, to
You
be
know,
perfectly
I'd
honest.
be interested in seeing a list of characters in this book. How many are we dealing with?
Oof, it's a
One of the
lot.
reasons
Yeah.
I used to praise moving pictures is because we had like 138 characters in that book. I'd be interested to see actually generally how the Discworld series compares in terms of big numbers of characters. I'd say this book is going to be pretty competitive, maybe
Yeah, it's up there.
100.
Oh, at least I mean, because you've got two competing timelines, each of them very fully populated. I mean, you've basically got both versions of the city, right from the top, from the patrician the whole way down to the prostitutes on the street, is pretty much fully populated. Now, the present day timeline that's been populated over the course of 30 books, but they're all still there, and a lot of them get mentioned in the in those sections. So yeah, this has got to be one of the most stuffed books with characters, if not the most.
I'm certainly a good welcome back for Dibbler. Has really sort of a bit more in the forefront here, and Nobby, who isn't a guardsman in this, is just a kid, and yeah,
Yeah,
it's still very rich in Nobby knobsness.
indeed. Yeah, I think the Dibbler stuff does. If there's any element that feels like a little bit like standalone fan service, I think the Dibbler stuff feels that's as close to straight up fan service as we get. And that's fine. I think it's been earned. Also, there's precedent for versions of Dibbler turning up in other places. So, like, obviously, if we're going back in time, we got to get the younger version of Dibbler involved in that as well. So it's absolutely got precedent. Doesn't feel out of place, but it's definitely the kind of most straight up fan service. I think in the prequel section.
We've been John about this for almost 2 hours now, but I wanted to ask you what you felt of the lilac.
Yeah, so it's such a nice motif. I don't have like any kind of thesis on like whether it has any particular symbolism or like if it has any kind of real world equivalent. I'm not sure about that, but I do kind of just to have a symbol of like or just an unspoken agreement between people who experienced something that other people didn't. Just that idea that like anybody, I mean, certainly like you feel that walking down the street where I live, that like you walking past people who have just seen some shit, like who've been through a hell of a lot, and they're not necessarily wearing a piece of lilac, but one day there might be maybe there is a particular date in a year where that is of more significance to them, but just that idea that like ordinary people have experienced extraordinary things, but they just endure and they just carry on. I mean, I think that's kind of what it means to me a little bit.
I didn't feel the significance of it was completely sort of cemented or nailed on the back. But I mean, it's quite. I'm just looking at some pictures of it here. It's described as a purple flower in the book and with a distinct smell, and that was kind of enough. That it's kind of the ginger of flowers. It's got
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if
something
it, I
special
think,
to it.
yeah, and I mean, I guess I hesitate to draw this connection, obviously, but obviously there is a connection to be drawn between the wearing of flowers to remember wars specifically. Obviously, like in our world, people will wear poppies to commemorate certain conflicts or all conflicts, and in Discworld, these particular people are wearing this particular flower to commemorate this particular conflict. But like the scale of it is so separate, and the fact that they have this kind of like, if you don't know what it means, you weren't there kind of thing. It almost feels like the antithesis of wearing a poppy in some ways. It's much less performative. It's much more of a private kind of thing, I guess. So yeah, I don't know. I think I have a feeling it probably does mean something quite specific and maybe something kind of personal to Terry, but it doesn't feel the need to kind of beat us over the head with it.
Well, I like that it has personal meaning for the characters. And I mean, yeah, in a kind of a ideal religious way, and it's something you practice quietly and you do it for yourself,
Yeah.
for the show of it. So I did make a mental note when I was reading this book that I completely forgot about until now. This is a tree time moment.
Oh, haven't
I'm,
had that for a while.
I'm going to read two sentences.
Let's do it.
Um, Lilac has glossy heart-shaped leaves, smooth bark. It displays spikes of densely packed, small, pale pinky purple flowers that have a sweet smell. That was tree time.
Lovely, lovely. And we're sure that lilac grows on. Oh yes, we are sure that lilac grows on trees. Of course. How dare I ever question the master of tree time? Cool.
Do we want to go to the graveyard with this?
I mean, yes, I think we have to because we made such a big deal of talking up Carcer at the start that we gotta see it through. And the fight at the graveyard and veterinary obviously turning up and kind of bringing his involvement of it full circle, and finally revealing to Vimes first of all that he knows about Keel, and that also then sort of confiding in Vimes as to why he wears the lilac and what his role in the whole affair was. It's almost like the opposite of some of their. We have these quite formal encounters between Vimes and Veterinary, usually at the end of a book, whenever he has to go into the oblong office and explain himself, or they go and ask for a new dartboard or whatever.
Tradition now, isn't it?
Whereas this feels more kind of peer level. They're not kind of they're not in that formal setting, and they're have actually end up kind of opening up to each other a little bit, which is quite sweet.
Yeah, we know it's kind of it's a bit of a Terry trope at this point that Vimes is not a killer by choice. He doesn't kill unarmed men, and even with Carcer being a particularly evil piece of shit. But Terry really sort of works hard to keep with. I mean, I guess what he's doing is rewinding after rewind having a narrative that's rewound and then fast forwarding it, and now he's rewinding it a bit again to sort of try and convince us that quite successfully, in my opinion, that Vimes might actually kill Carcer. And
Yeah.
Well, whatever direction it's going in, that he will not. Yeah, I found quite successful.
Yeah, because you do, and that's part of the genius of that character. Because you kind of, by this point, after so many books, it's like Batman. You're like, well, be a Batman. It's not going to kill somebody because he's Batman. But you're like, again, if Batman ever was going to kill somebody, it would be the Joker. And obviously, there's a very famous, comic exploring what that would be like. So this idea that there is a villain that Vimes might kill, like that's 100%. That's Carcer. So yeah, I think it's really, really well set up. But the payoff is just right because we believe that he might actually do it.
I think the whole thing about veterinary being there and carrying on the fight is something that's actually incredibly interesting. And I mean, we essentially get a few lines where veterinary tells us and Vimes that fact. And it seems like something really potent for further writing on and reading on.
Yeah,
Uh,
for sure.
I
Yeah, and like we said with Rosie, I guess, the whole idea that like this was kind of cyclical, like this idea that there was a patrician who got in, said all the right things, but then turned into a tyrant, or in that case, then they had to be murdered. Then, the same thing kept happening over and over again. And then once Veterinary was thrust into the middle of that, he was like, no, this has to stop. And I can sort of see that being the impetus for him to
mirroring,
kind of.
very much mirroring Rit Cully that way.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, yeah.
So that's yeah, and kind of a new age in
Breaking it, yeah, breaking that cycle. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the same way.
there is this suggestion, and certainly it does come from Vime's paranoia that the patrician knew a lot of what was going on with the Keel Vimes thing, to which the patrician says, "No, I just worked it out a minute ago." And
Yeah,
I think he's telling the truth in this instance.
yeah, and you could really drill down into that and be like, he only worked it out a minute ago because it only became true a minute ago. It only became true that day because if Vimes hadn't have made it back, the timelines wouldn't have. Do you know what I mean? So
Well,
you can get into the timey
technically
wiminess of it a little.
24 hours or more.
Yeah, 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 yeah. But up
Yeah,
until
technically you're right too.
up until the lightning struck, the real John Keel still existed in that timeline. So yeah, up until 24 hours before or whatever. So there was no opportunity. And that I think that's kind of the logic of how the monks holding the two timelines and all that kind of stuff. That's how I choose to interpret it. Anyway,
Yeah,
that's the fun of
there
time
is a
travel, isn't it?
little bit of flaw because Vimes adopts the identity of John Keel before we find out John Keel has been murdered. Um, but there's also a little bit of a suggestion that from the monks that things in this new timeline kind of will sort of replicate the old timeline to a similar sort of extent. I guess the way mushrooms replicate shapes around them. So we could say that the the shapes the time continuums take are those that guide Vimes to assume the John Keel identity.
Yeah, there's a John Keel shaped hole in the timeline, and Vimes ends up filling it. I think Lead say pretty much states that outright. But what interests is the way the other characters perceive it. I find that quite interesting. Like, what did they like? Their memory of John Keel obviously changed to reflect Vimes. Once Vimes made it back to the present, I think that's quite cool. And yeah, pointed out the way in Veterinary's kind of revelation there. It's really cool.
Yeah, you have Dr. Lawn,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
words of Vimes, thinks he's Keels. Then you've got the whole psychology and then the things that we experience when we are very young mold us throughout our entire lives. So Sam, Nobby, both meeting Keel slash Vimes when very young,
Yeah.
obviously will remember him. And when they meet Vimes, the Vimes that we know will regard him with trustworthiness and will be already sort of conditioned, imprinted to interact with him well, respect him well,
Oh yeah.
as
Yeah.
much as Nobby can respect him.
Indeed, indeed. Any quotes? Want to do a quote?
Yeah, got two. I've got an honourable quote, which is near the start of the book, and I think is reprised somewhere. He hated being thought of as one of those people that wore stupid ornamental armour. It was guilt by association.
Oh, that's a heavy pun right there. It's a oh, indeed. But yeah, you can't not laugh out loud when you get to those. It's so good. And then, do you want to give me your actual favorite quote?
Actual favourite quote.
Okay.
It wasn't a city, it was a process. Wow. A weight on the world that distorted the land for hundreds of miles around. People who'd never see it in their whole lives, nevertheless spent their life working for it. Thousands and thousands of green acres were part of it. Forests were part of it. It drew in and consumed. I'm going to keep going. And
Dude.
gave back the dung from its pens and the soot from its chimneys and steel and saucepans and all the tools by which its food was made, and also its clothes and fashions, ideas and interesting vices, songs and knowledge, and something which, if looked at in the right light, was called civilization. That's what civilization meant. It meant the city.
Yeah, I mean it's up there. Absolutely. It's again, like we say constantly, like that Terry has such an astute understanding of what human nature is and what society is, and that's it. bang on right there. He basically just like that's his whole thesis essentially spelled out. It is not my favorite quote from this book. I will say that. This is the only time so far. So we've read what 29 books so far, and this is the first time I've been on a reread of a book. And before I open the cover again, I know exactly what my favorite quote in this book is. I'm building this up way too much, right? I kind of did it on purpose, to be honest. But again, regular listeners will know that even in like the funniest Discworld books, I'm always pulling out the kind of the serious quote, the quote that kind of points out like, you know, Terry's skewering of human nature or something a little bit dark or something a little bit poignant or something a little bit serious. And this book is full of those. I mean, this book is basically wall to wall that. But despite that, this just made me laugh. This line made me laugh more than any line in any Discworld book before or since. And it is when Lord Winder dies at the party and death comes for him.
Yeah.
And
take it away, PJ.
Winder's mind felt even fuzzier than it had done over the past few years, but he was certain about cake. He'd been eating cake, but now there wasn't any. Through the mists, he saw it, apparently close, but when he tried to reach it, a long way away, a certain realization dawned on him. Oh, he said. Yes, said Death. Not even time to finish my cake? No, there is no more time even for cake. For you, the cake is over. You have reached the end of cake. I just bust myself laughing the first time I read that. And I remember the first time I reread it was at university. And one of my friends was also a Discworld fan. And that just became like a recurring gag. I can't even remember in what context we would have used it. But we'd have been constantly telling each other that the time for cake had passed. You know, if the night was getting too late or something like that, I'd be like, nope, you've reached the end of cake.
Yeah, this is such a great book for those belly laughs, those big out loud. I was at a cafe during the week, and I was reading what we call a Vimesism. I can't remember exactly, and I just erupted, and a woman next to me turned over, and so I had to explain to her. And she, oh, yes, she'd read some elderly woman had read some Terry Pratchett. And yeah, a nice little chat.
I think partly because like the tension is wound so tight. This is by far the most tense of all Discworld books, I think. So then those comedy moments, they're greater releases of tension then, you know, so you tend to laugh a bit harder, a bit louder when those moments do come. And that's just my all-time favorite.
So yeah, Night Watch. I think both of us right up at the top.
Yeah,
around that.
I mean, I guess at some stage, maybe since book 30 is on the horizon, you know, maybe an attempt at rankings, not a full 30 book rankings, but maybe a top 5 each might be appropriate at this stage. A little treat for listeners, people with too much time on their hands like we do.
Next time is We Free Men. Have you read The We Free Men?
I have, yeah. I don't know if there are any gaps remaining. Oh no, there is at least one gap remaining, actually.
Can you remember before you read The We Free Men what you thought it was about?
I put it off for a while because I didn't read it as soon as it came out. So like, I think I had a fairly good idea. I think I put off reading it because again, it was marketed as kind of, you know, young adult. Like maybe a little bit on the fence about some of the witches stuff at that stage, but why
give me a spoiler?
Oops.
Actually, no, you can admit to me after if you did or not.
Yeah.
There's people who haven't.
No comment. Why are you asking me what I think it's about if you don't want to know?
I'm just interested. So I thought it was a really good question for a first time thing, because obviously I don't know what it's about. Obviously it's about The We Free Men, where we've met before.
Yes,
I'm wondering, is there going to be a Scottish themed or Celtic themed theme which will
How
be
about
interesting as I'm going on holiday to Scotland.
to Scotland?
Will be
Yeah.
my
Are you
holiday
gonna?
reading.
I won't. I would definitely recommend reading it in Scotland, but then I would recommend reading it regardless of where you're going. So let's not necessarily say it. That's spoilerific. Yeah, I'll be interested to revisit it actually.
Do you want to give? I'm just going to track down a bit of data. Do you want to
Ooh.
do some plugs for me and you?
Yeah, sure. I'll start with myself. Unfortunately, Country Rogues is no longer on iPlayer, so I can't plug that.
Please.
However, I know. Well, all good things must come to an end. However, our short virtual reality experience, Help, will be exhibited at the Render Festival in Belfast, the Port View Trade Centre, on the 12th and 13th of February. So
Oh,
probably
could you repeat that, please? That sounds interesting.
So, Render Festival, which is a multimedia festival taking place in the Portview Trade Centre in East Belfast on the 12th and 13th of February. Myself and Owen will be there exhibiting our virtual reality short film Help. So, if you're there, come along. It's a really cool event. It's been on a couple of times before. It's super fun. It's in this big old warehouse, loads of video games, animation, augmented reality, virtual reality, cool art. It's great. It's just, yeah, really fun, neon soaked. Good times.
Yeah, I've been part of that at a much more upmarket kind of thing. The Help VR experience really is great. Portview is a fantastic space, which I think will bring an awful lot to a lot of sort of sensory backing audio and atmospheric kind of thing to that Help um, private screening.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure how we're going to be set up on the day, but it's a really cool event. This is the third time it's run, and it's gone from strength to strength. So if you're interested in any of that stuff and you're in the Belfast area, I highly recommend it. Render Festival, 12th and 13th of February.
Cool stuff. The Andrew Luke YouTube channel, which you should all subscribe to now, link in the comments. Andrew Luke will be running gerbil blog videos
Ooh.
along with Always Sunny videos, just until I get my strength back and bring you some more unusual and interesting stuff. But hey, those gerbils are super cute. If you watched our video version of Morris and his educated rodents, where we had a number of video issues and I patched those up with gerbil footage, and I already know how adorable they are. So check out
I mean,
gerblogs.
you would rather watch
12.
gerbils than us.
We have 12, including Vimes and Dartan.
Indeed. Yeah. I mean, is there a problem? Is there a technical problem that can't be solved with the application of gerbils? I don't think there is.
That's it. That's it. I'm going to give us a few thank yous. A shout out to Ben and Elizabeth of the Prat Chat podcast. Now I'm at book 20 and I can spend a lot more time listening to their podcast. I've kind of been very hypersensitive about spoilers, so I appreciate if you don't give me any spoilers in the comments when you're talking to me anywhere. Keep that up and we'll all get along swimmingly. Thank you to a couple of people on our Blue Sky who've been popping up and spreading the word. David Curtis and Mike, aka Jarek. We look forward to getting around to a lot of those comments on YouTube. Early episodes of this come up through my Patreon, patreon.com/at Andrew Luke, for about just over £1 a month.
Money well spent.
Yep. So I'm going to say thank you to a few of my patrons, some who have come just for this very podcast, and there's a lot of other stuff on there. But thank you to Sonia, Andree, Richard Huang, Andrew Bolster, Donal, Fallon, Alex C, Amanda Rodriguez, Shell, Dave Cromie, Matt Saunders, Alan Rowell, Benjamin Stone, Arsalan, Haider, Ali, and particularly Ian Lawther, who goes halvers on the Zoom bill, which allows us to do this. PJ, you can find us on the web at what address?
Discworld GNU. So we're at Discworld GNU on YouTube, on Blue Sky, and on Facebook. So you can find us there. Don't know if we still have a link tree or anything like that, but we're on Spotify. We're on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts. We're on Fire. Ooh, I don't know. We're everywhere. Come, yeah. If you're listening to us now, then you can certainly find us at the same place where you find this one.
Rise up, rise up, rise
How
up.
do they rise up? Yeah. Oh man, I mean, can't even get into that. I'll start crying. But yeah, I feel like we've done quite well. Did themed dates. We should have tried to land this on the 25th of May. But I mean, we're only 4-5 months early. But you will definitely have to give it a shout out on the glorious 25th of May when the time comes. But yeah, that was great. Great to do. One of my favorites. I've been looking forward to this one for a long time. Thanks for joining us. Hope you liked it.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye.
Bye.